All right, good afternoon, everyone, again. My name is Sasha. I'm a marketing manager here at Witham. Thanks for joining us today. We will be talking about building your document management strategy for Office 365. Jill Hanneman will be the presenter today. I just wanted to run through quick housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded. We will send out a link to the recording and the slide deck later this afternoon. Excuse me. As you have questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. Don't hold back, ask anything you want to, and we'll address the questions at the end. If we run out of time, we'll certainly address the questions by email. And with that, Jill, whenever you're ready, I think we can get started.
All right, thanks, Sasha. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to be talking about building your document management strategy for Office 365. So just to do a few introductions, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a principal here with Witham. I've been in the knowledge management space actually for close to about 15 years now. And I did not start working with SharePoint until MOS 2007, and had worked with a few other content management systems and document management systems prior to that. And what I really liked about SharePoint was how integrated it was with Microsoft Office. Working with other platforms, I saw the push and pull of editing and how challenging it was sometimes to manage permissions, to download, to check in, check out documents. And MOS 2007 provided a much more seamless experience for users back then in working with documents. So fast forward to today, I am still a Microsoft junkie. I'm still very passionate about the SharePoint platform, but now the conversation completely revolves around Office 365. And so that is really the focus of our conversation today. And we're going to touch on all of my favorite subjects, which is knowledge management, document management, information architecture, records management, and we'll try to dive into as many of the topics as we possibly can, but I'm going to warn you guys that this webinar is jam-packed. So a little bit about Witham Digital. So we are, we've been in business. We have been in the SharePoint space for over 16 plus years. The founder of our group, he has been working with SharePoint since before it was SharePoint. So as a result, our collective team has done over 400 plus implementations of SharePoint and now Office 365. Our first Office 365 implementation, the first internet we did on SharePoint online, happened in 2012. So it was pretty early on, and that particular customer was very bleeding edge. So as a result, we have seen this platform grow. We are abreast of the changes, and we are ready to share those with you guys and help you through your challenges. So before we kick off, this is just for my knowledge, just to get a sense of where you all are coming from. How long have you all had Office 365? So if you could just take a minute or really a quick click to let me know how long you've had Office 365. It gives me a sense of the group and what type of maturity we're looking at. If you guys are rolling it out, if you're looking for a redesign, if you're looking to see the latest and greatest, let us know. Okay, I can't actually see the poll results. Okay, I can see the poll results. All right. So there are about, it's kind of an even split actually. So there are about 20% of you who are less than 6 months, 30% 1+ years, between 1 and 2 years, 20% 2+ years, and a couple of you since 2013. So yeah, there's a lot happening. There's a lot going on with this product, and so hopefully we will have enough information for everybody. So just before we kind of kick things into gear, I gave another webinar about 6 months ago in January about building your knowledge management strategy in Office 365. And so I kind of wanted to piggyback off that topic and just kind of put a frame of reference here. So in that conversation, I talked about the digital workplace being composed of really 4 components here. So we have our document, content management, our information sharing, which I like to think of as your corporate intranet, communication, which is how we exchange, how we communicate with one another, and the tools that Office 365 provides for that. So persistent chatting in Teams, microblogging in Yammer, email, instant messaging with Skype for Business, or instant messaging with Teams, and how we have that exchange. And then process, being the focus of how do we automate or provide some automation to business processes in the organization. And it doesn't even have to be business process automation. It could just be how do we run different operations through our organization and leverage the tools that we have. So we are going to just be focusing pretty much on the one document management tab up at the top. So, you know, the question around where do we store content? How do our teams and project groups work together? What kind of space can we provide for them? What about document repositories, metadata? How do we bring it all together with search? So we're going to be just focusing there. And just to give you all a quick primer here. So when we talk about document management in SharePoint, we're going to make the basic assumption that we are able to create, we're able to share, and we're able to discover content, we're able to browse, and we're able to search for content in SharePoint and Office 365. So with that said, you know, we're talking about Office integration, being able to seamlessly edit and leverage Office tools like Word and PowerPoint and Excel. Maintain a version history, maintain properties of our files, leverage content types for templatizing, for applying metadata, for site-wide or organization-wide categorization, and the ability to share news, pages, lists, simple link sharing, internal and external. And then we have some mobile tools like Office Lens that allow us to capture data and put it into Office very seamlessly. And the last piece is Delve, discovery powered by Delve. So machine learning, leveraging artificial intelligence to make it easier for us to find our content and reuse it. So I'm not going to go over these basics. There are plenty of you who've been using SharePoint long enough and Office 365 long enough that you know about these capabilities. So when we start talking about leveraging Office 365 for document management, we are going to, let me just turn off the ringer for my phone so you guys don't hear that. We're going to be talking about how do we set it up? And I think that that's, you know, an important part of the conversation, especially for the folks who are fairly new to Office 365, that 18% of you who've had Office 365 for less than 6 months. Then we're going to talk about how do we organize it. All right, so now that we figured out what we're going to do, what our blueprint is, what our plan is, and how do we move forward, how are we going to organize it? Then we'll talk about categorization. Then we'll talk about sharing documents, and then finally retaining. So starting off with setting it up, these are really the primary actions of document management in Office 365, or really electronic file management. So you know, what we're looking to do is conduct some individual document storage. We're looking for team workspaces that allow us to have a physical space for us to store documents and make them accessible for our users. And then we want a document repository, a place where the document can finally reside and it can be stored. I can't even tell you how many SharePoint instances over the years that I have seen that are only document repositories. And we're kind of even ignoring the workspaces and the individual doc storage and all that kind of stuff. But it just becomes a glorified file share. And I'm sure there are a few of you out there who know what I'm talking about. Then we have our news, pages, and lists. And this is a hallmark feature of SharePoint and SharePoint Online, but we'll talk a little bit more about that and how it intersects with document management. And then finally, records management. Records management, we've all been doing it forever, and you probably have a team dedicated on staff to do records management and have been sending paper documents off inboxes to your offsite fireproof storage for decades. But whether or not you have instituted records management electronically in your organization, the tools are available in this suite to enable records management and to do it very simply and easily. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So just to highlight that, and then all this is pulled together by browsing and searching. I am going to be operating on the notion in this whole conversation that we trust that Office 365 search and browsing are going to do their job. And I'm going to just focus more so on the tools and the configuration and the setup and some of the more cognizant decisions that we can make. So for a document lifecycle, this is a pretty standard document lifecycle. And I always encourage organizations to map out your document lifecycle from the get-go. So, you know, it can be really easy to get overwhelmed by Office 365's features and how many options you have for managing content. So I just like to take a step back and let's think about what your requirements are and what your business needs are for document management. So what's the life cycle like? How, and breaking it down to how someone creates a document and where does that happen? An example of this is I was just recently working with a international relief organization, and they talked to me about how admins will generate documents for board meetings for their executives, and they start working on the document, and then they will work on editing it with their executive, but it also has to get passed around to some of the other executives. And so this process is kind of a combination of leveraging Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and then saving it locally or saving it to a file share, and then it gets passed around through email attachments, or it gets printed out and gets marked up and someone manually edits it. So if you think about that process, you know, we go into multiple author collaboration. Once a document is generated, once it's created, it moves into multiple author collaboration. Then eventually we'll get to a final draft. And finally, after that blessing, it can move to become a published document. So this published document now, you know, in our consulting world could be that this is the final deliverable that we have sent to a customer. So this document then gets held for posterity and it's saved because it was a final deliverable that we gave to a client. Moving to create best practice, that is where we've said, okay, you know what, the work we did, it could be repeatable. We can leverage this artifact to make the process go faster for ourselves. So let's register this and put this in a knowledge base where others can find it and perhaps make their job easier because we already have a baseline for them to start from. And if it's a best practice, perhaps maybe it should be saved as a record. And this is not a completely linear process by any means. It's possible that you could go from published document straight to save file as record, or even multiple authors to, hey, it's done and we're going to save it as a record. Or it's just document created and it has sensitive information like a like PII or some other type of information, and it can go save file as record immediately. So so now we kind of shift the conversation. All right, let's examine Office 365 a little bit. I've shown the icons of the apps and the workloads you can use in Office 365 to store files. So OneDrive for Business, Stream for videos, Teams, SharePoint, and Office 365 groups. So how are you using Office 365 for files? Are you using it for, your document lifecycle? Are you going to have all of that running through Office 365? Or do you have another repository like Box that you integrate in? So the question is very specific to you, and figuring out what files you have and then aligning it to the right features of Office 365. So I'm going to be sprinkling in a lot of the latest updates that we got from the SharePoint conference, North America. It was held in Las Vegas just a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say it's still less than a month since it happened. So I have a lot of information around the roadmap and how Microsoft is positioning these tools, because a lot was dropped that really make a difference in the decisions that we make now. So fundamentally, groups and SharePoint are operating as the content service for Office 365. And what I like about this graphic is that it kind of shows you a little bit more of the framework and what we're going to be working with now. So groups, Office 365 groups will be leveraged as a platform for managing permissions and membership. So that is the direction that Microsoft is going. This is not to say that SharePoint permissions are going away, but what they're introducing with the modern framework and modern team sites and modern communication sites is an Office 365 permission management schema. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it provides you with the groupings of owners, members, and policy to manage different aspects, manage permissions and security of your sites and your content. So then SharePoint as a framework is going to be leveraged for files, for lists, for pages, and news. So what you see up at the top are the apps that are going to allow you to consume the services of Office 365 group security and permissions and SharePoint team site features. So what this means, there's a lot of what this means, is that we no longer have to think, we're no longer going to have the conversation around what app do you use, because the underlying features that you get from SharePoint are going to be accessible in SharePoint team sites and Teams, in the two primary interfaces where collaboration and perhaps also document repositories will exist. There's also integration with Yammer. Office 365 Groups is still an interface through Outlook, and then Outlook also has that tie-in bringing together group messaging and the distribution group aspect of a group. So a lot to kind of unpack there, but it's really important because I think that this really changes the game for and simplifies your path forward with this tool, and especially with document management and where you go and how you configure. So this is just a screenshot of a real document library with columns, metadata, and all of the same features, great features that you know a document library to have in the Teams interface. And so that's really exciting because for the past couple of years that we've been using Teams, we haven't been able to access the same columns through the Teams interface. If I wanted more columns, if I wanted to revert versions or get any of the other rich features, I'd have to go to the browser view and interact in SharePoint. So what all of this is to say is that you no longer have to think about where you are or what you can get in one interface versus another, because you're going to be able to get all the features in either place. So if you like working in the Teams desktop app, you can continue to do that, and you can train your teams to do that, and it's great. Or if you've got legacy SharePoint users who are just really comfortable working in SharePoint, they understand it, it makes sense, you can have them work there, and the two will work seamlessly together. So that is a big deal when we now think about, all right, how do we set this up? How are we going to organize? How are we going to set up document management for our users? So in 6 months ago, when we had the conversation around designing knowledge management in Office 365, I had a table around maturity usage for different use cases. So I've kind of taken the same theme, and I've extracted some of those scenarios, so you can see those scenarios up on the board. And collaboration, so is it kind of a one person, is it, you know, a smaller group, or is it multiple people? And then I've aligned the best app for Office 365. So this is our take on how you should be using these tools and what they're best suited for. So again, still personal file storage, small group collaboration. Best app really is OneDrive for Business and some Teams. So Teams for small group collaboration also works really well, provides you with a really great space to collaborate. So as we get into file sharing and collab, document repository, news pages lists, knowledge library, you will see that Teams and SharePoint are synonymous because you're going to get the same features from a SharePoint team site. You can drop pages into a Teams browser. Pages can become a tab. Lists can become a tab in Teams. So all of the same capabilities that you are used to getting out of SharePoint, you're going to be able to experience them in Teams through the tab interface now. I like to think of it as all the times that the navigation in SharePoint failed us and it didn't make sense, and it was really, really hard to train our users to access and to find the list and to you know, get that they had to go back to the page to interact with a different web part we had. Now we have this nice tabbed interface, very flexible, and it's very easy to manage and administer for someone who is not a developer. So to link a tab to a document library or to link a page to a team tab, all of it is very simple now. So it really isn't much of a conversation. You provision everything. You can provision things, you know, in SharePoint. You can allow users to participate in the provisioning. The training process is much simpler. And we have Stream now to house our videos. And we can leverage Stream in Teams and SharePoint sites and channels. The last thing I'll mention is records management on this slide. I put Office 365 because now with labels, and we'll get to that in a little bit, you can manage records across Office 365, and it doesn't matter where the file is held. So we'll chat a little bit more about that later. So as we're kind of continuing here, you know, I'm talking a lot, but I'm saying that we don't have to make any decisions, which is awesome. So the conversation got infinitely simpler. And as a result, Microsoft has changed their inner-outer loop diagram. So this is a really popular visual that Microsoft released maybe about a year and a half ago, and it kind of resonated with the entire Microsoft SharePoint community, because finally, after 3 years of talking about Office 365 groups and what to use when, Microsoft came out with something prescriptive and said, this is how we're intending you to use these tools. So they still have the inner loops and the outer loops. The inner loop I like to describe as like your department teammates, your core team members, the people that you consistently work with on a day-to-day basis. If you don't know who that is, your analytics in Office 365 can probably tell you. And then your outer loop would be people in the rest of the people in your department, not your core team, the rest of the company, people who are in departments across from yours, and people who you don't work with every day, but you have something you could potentially learn from and information you could share with them. So they're still saying that Yammer is best for that outer loop, but they're saying that Teams is better for that inner loop. And SharePoint is the underlying content and document collaboration framework supporting both of those. So again, you know, finally, everything that we have been wanting, a single point of truth, is happening in the technology that we are using. So SharePoint is that single point of truth to support and to store and to manage our documents. And then everything else is Outlook. And, you know, we can, if you have questions about that, happy to engage in a conversation with you about that. So what I like to say with my customers is it's really good to just put a visual together of how that document lifecycle works. And this is just one way that you could potentially represent that. So your individual content, what tool you use, your inner loop and how that interacts, your team repositories, where you have that team workspace and you can work on drafts and you can edit together as a group, and then moving into organizational repositories, kind of hovering into your outer loop, and that's where you have your department content, library of videos, the knowledge base for your organization, where communities of practice may be stored, and electronic records are managed. And then in the outer loop for social collaboration and microblogging, you have Yammer. And then you can also interact outside. So these are all sort of the strategy pieces, and I really think it's a great idea, you know, if you're looking to revise your governance strategy, you're looking to simplify and so people understand how to use these tools and what occurs in them. These are just some really simple tools that you can leverage to set that in place and to make it communicative to your users. So now I've taken that same document lifecycle and I've aligned it with the apps in Office 365. So in case there was any question of where the document should be, where you should store it, when it should move, this kind of helps clarify that path and what the document lifecycle is. And then another thing I'd like to mention, which is really exciting, that there is the OneDrive Sync client that can sync OneDrive for Business files to SharePoint libraries. I have the link below. I know that you can't click on it through GoToWebinar, but we'll make sure to share it in the communication after this webinar is finished, and when we share the deck out. So meaning you can leave your documents in your OneDrive for Business, but instead of creating more versions, which you had to do in order to transfer the document into a new location, you can now sync the documents so that you still have that single point of truth. So it can be edited in your document library and it'll still update the source in your OneDrive for Business. So no matter where the document is, you're accessing the latest and greatest and you're not creating more versions, which we've all been asking for a long time, and this is really exciting. Okay, so moving on into Organize. All right, so now we've established you're pretty much just going to be using SharePoint, and you can access the SharePoint content through a number of different sources. So you can access it through Yammer, you can access it through Teams. For the most part, I'm going to assume that you're going to either be using SharePoint or you're going to be using Teams to access files. And again, the context of our conversation is strictly for document management and for file management. So when we talk about organizing and setting it up, and now that you figured out what tools you're using, how do we build the sites? And what's our underlying architecture going to be for organizing this and making it intuitive? This is actually a really old slide from the introduction of the Office 365 groups 3 years ago. And it still rings true because this is Microsoft's focus. This is where they're going. And I think it visually depicts the new world that we're living in with modern team sites, modern sites, and hub sites. So this is the introduction and the conversation around hub sites. So previously on the left, when we designed SharePoint sites and we were designing collaboration, schemas and ways to organize our file shares, it was all very hierarchical. Folders with nested folders, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 levels deep. I hope not 8 levels deep, but possibly 8 levels deep. So you can see how that makes sense on the left. And there's even something that rings true today to how we design intranets. People understand hierarchical nested relationships, and it's really hard to get kind of out of that habit, because categorization is hard. But where we're going is the visual that you see on the right, which is information in a networked type fashion. So something that's very flat, something that interconnects with one another, no nested relationships, but it allows you to access content faster, and it allows the tool itself to adapt and to learn. So the real challenge here that we're all faced with is, how do we get out of the thinking in a hierarchical fashion, and how do we think about our content in a flat way, but in a networked way? So ontologies are alive and well, and if you are an ontologist, then you have found your calling. So here's a visual of hub sites and organization. And what I just really wanted to show you here is that you can create hub sites by different subject matter. So you could do it by department. You could do it by, well, I prefer if you don't do it by department. So just if you've ever sat in an information architecture conversation with me, you know that I am not a fan of organizational hierarchies for categorizing content. But what you can do is you can create smaller hubs, and this can be a way that you create your team site collections. So as you group team sites together and you start thinking about how this is going to interact with the Microsoft Teams platform and the creation of channels and all that kind of stuff, think about everything in a flat way and trying to build out this flat structure for the management of your sites. Give me 1 second here. I have a bit of a cold, so excuse me. So as we start thinking about how to build out our team sites, and how you want to improve the browsing experience of how users get to those. So remember, in your SharePoint app, your SharePoint homepage, it's going to surface the sites that you're a member of and that you frequent the most. So Delve is going to control some of that user experience, so the browsing need isn't quite there as much. But you still probably want some of that browse experience, and that's where you can start conceptualizing flat spoke-like relationships between the team sites that you're creating. And then remember that your team site is going to correspond to a team in Microsoft Teams. So while this can get a little bit confusing, I like to think that perhaps you just think about that user experience first and then realize that Microsoft Teams, the navigation is pretty flat as it is. So figuring out how to map things back and make it easy for users to use isn't as much of a challenge there. But as you start building it out, think through in this fashion. So as I mentioned, a team is going to correspond with a team site. So you can view your SharePoint document library in Teams, or you can view it in the SharePoint in the browser. So this is just a screenshot of a document library, a shared documents library in SharePoint. But it does correspond with channels in that particular team. So each one of these countries corresponds with a different channel in the team. So the folder corresponds with the channel files tab, and a feature that they've added to SharePoint is that when you are browsing through the shared documents library, you can't delete the folder. It will warn you if you try to delete it that it is tied to a channel and it can't be deleted through this interface. So there is definitely some already built-in automated governance to reduce any snafus or issues with content management in the document library when you have some other features. But again, you can view it any which way, which is great. And another feature that Microsoft is rolling out and that they want you to do is this movement that has been dubbed hashtag Groupify, which means that you would take your existing team sites in SharePoint Online and you would connect them to an Office 365 group. So modern team sites, when you create them, are going to be integrated with Office 365 groups. So that's already going to be there, but this is for any existing teams that you would like to connect to an Office 365 group. So there is a team site readiness utility with the modernization scanner in GitHub, and it is called SharePoint.modernization. And so you can find that, and you can assess your existing team sites as to whether or not it is a good fit, if they are ready to be connected to Office 365 groups. So the pros and cons of this, why would you want to do this? The pros are pretty enticing. The groupifying would really, it really intends to enable you to leverage Office 365 group permissions, which means they are easier to manage. You can manage them at the administrator level. So you minimize any issues, you minimize any risk of content getting out. You can apply policies at the administrator level down to the team sites, which just helps with security and management of your documents that much more. And then it also provides you with that group messaging, the associated distribution list. So a big pro of Office 365 groups is that it provides you with that easy capability of emailing the group and just virtually creating you a distribution list. So that can be really nice in communicating and having that collaboration space with communication all together. Okay. So the cons are that you are not able to have subsites in modern team sites. And in order to groupify, you need to unnest team sites, which might be very challenging. And you'd also need to unnest security groups. So if you have security groups in SharePoint Online, you would have to manually take people out of those security groups and add them as a member or an owner or a guest in your Office 365 groups. Yes, okay, so someone is saying that you can't group team sites, you're only able to group team site collections with the team site template. So that is correct. So I am talking about the site collections in groupifying the site collections, which is what I'm saying, that you can't convert sub-sites, sub-team sites into the groupify. So thank you. Okay. So we're breezing through this. This is a lot of information. There have been a lot of changes. So focusing on categorization, you know, the purposes of metadata, right? We want to be able to disseminate information. We want to make it easier for us to retrieve it. You know, filtering, sorting, leveraging all the strong features of lists and libraries are there, and we can leverage it in the Teams interface, and we can leverage it in SharePoint in the browser. And that is the real strength of metadata. It provides us with resource description. It can help us with retention, and it also helps us with rights management and ownership of these files. So as you are thinking through your metadata strategy, one of the ways that we approach it is that we really look to further define and create more robust metadata at the local library and department levels. So if you're helping your organization get this set up, you know, having coaching sessions, giving examples, looking at file shares and translating those labels into columns for your users and giving them a taste of the power of being able to filter and sort and create views will all be really helpful in making that transition, and also retaining a lot of the great detailed metadata fields that people have created to help with this information dissemination and retrieval thing. I always like to say that, you know, it's good to have organization-wide metadata fields and managed metadata fields. But, you know, you really need to make sure that you are keeping those at a minimum, 2 to 3 fields. Nobody wants to be applying a ton of metadata fields, and especially if it's too high level to make any real impact on the content. So you need to be really cognizant of the type of field that you are introducing to users, especially at the organization level, because if it's too broad and if it's too high level and it's not really going to provide value, but people have to fill it in, you're going to lose them. And that's not what we want to do. We want to get people to use this and to make it easy for them. So features that are getting introduced and that have been introduced. So bulk population of metadata, so in-place metadata entry. It's going to be, it's so much faster, it's so much more quick, and you're able to do a lot of it at one time. It will also, there's also going to be row formatting to highlight any metadata or any files that need metadata or are missing a particular metadata field. So there's so many really great features that are coming out. Another one that I really like is being able to edit SharePoint properties in Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So some of these are already out, more are coming, and I'm going to be writing a blog article on list library updates from the SharePoint conference this week or next week. So stay tuned. We'll be posting more information on that soon. Coming in the roadmap, I'm sure there are a lot of questions, especially around managed metadata. You know, what is live now for modern lists and libraries? So you can see what's live now. On the backlog is managed metadata, editing metadata in Office, Word, click to run, and other Office apps, click to run, will be coming up soon. Bulk editing in the browser, quick edit in Classic already exists. quick edit in Modern is coming very soon. And then investment areas. Investment areas for document management for this fiscal for fiscal year 2018. So these are a couple of pieces that are top of mind for the product team. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I just wanted to make this information available to you. So in case there was something that you were really you're really hoping for, like maybe modern geolocation fields. I know a couple of clients who would be really interested in that. Those are going to be coming up fairly soon. Web parts for list and libraries are coming soon. So there are a lot of features that they're considering and that they're moving through. All right, so sharing. Sharing is probably one of the most asked about features, because we don't just work in a silo anymore, and we don't work just exclusively internal. We need better ways to share content with external folks. So we've seen some of that. It's still not as robust as some other platforms out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why Office 365 has lost some customers, and why some people have not leveraged Office 365 for document management in stronger ways. So first and foremost, shareable links are going to be very easy, and they're going to be easy to derive and to leverage for OneDrive for business files and for SharePoint files. So generating the link of who you'd like to share, and you can share the link via email to internal or external users, and you no longer need a Microsoft account to view and edit a document. But these are the options that you're going to have over here in the screenshot. So people in Contoso, people with existing access, specific people if you'd like to designate. So other options in link settings, you have greater options to blocking downloads of individual documents when you generate that list. You can have password protected documents so that you can share the document and say, hey, here's the password. I'm going to share the password with you in a different way for you to access the document. So it's allowing you to share and work on more sensitive content types and to ensure that there is some security placed around the link and editing capability of the document. Then there's also link expiration as well, which is awesome. This is just highlighting the blocked download feature, which is really important. And the external sharing piece, again, like I said, so important. So controlling who can access, who can share with external users. So if you have a lot of content, you want to limit to perhaps specific individuals or perhaps a specific department that is able to share with external users, you can do that. You can control what can be shared externally. So you can designate this by site or files without sensitive content. Control which external users can be shared with. So authenticated users, you can separate specific domains if you want to make sure that competitors are not able to access anything, or specific other companies. And you can also control externally shareable links, how they can be used, and which is what we just saw in the previous screenshot. So you can edit, you can expire the link, you can set the link for expiration, you can block the edit, and you can disable links and password protect those links as well. So a lot of really great features. I know a lot of these are still in the backlog, so they're to come, but that's going to be something that's really helpful, and I know will help a lot of organizations. And finally, retaining documents. We we don't spend a lot of time usually talking about records management, but it's something that we all do and we probably need to do more of. And then transitioning into electronic records management is also really important. So what Microsoft is transitioning to is leveraging labels at the Office 365 level to manage records. So well, I'll show you a screenshot in a second. You can still do records management in some of the more traditional ways that we know. So declaring an in-place record, setting up a record center. However, all of that is very SharePoint centric. So labels for records management, which you can find in the Security and Compliance Center, allows you to manage and implement records across Office 365. So you can publish the label and the policies for manual application to OneDrive for Business. You can publish it to SharePoint, you can publish it to Outlook, and it allows you greater flexibility in making sure that your entire tenant is protected with the policies that you want it to be protected with. So there are two options for application of labels. One is manual, and then the second is auto-applied. Auto-applied only comes with the E5 licensing suite. So if you don't have E5, then you're going to be looking at manual. And after a label has been applied, you can trigger a disposition, or you can start a retention period based on the label application. So there are a lot of different options here, and it gives you a lot more flexibility to organize your records management based on the different needs that you have. So with records management, here's just another view of the Security and Compliance Center, the dashboard for creating new tags and applying tags to different libraries, where those are being applied. So you have the dashboard for allowing you to apply those. And then when you're in OneDrive, so if that label is applied to OneDrive, applying the label to a file in OneDrive. So as I mentioned, the features for enterprise records management in SharePoint still exist. So the ability to declare a record in site and having multi-stage disposition policies, or you can have location-based policies also applied. But then this would only be for files in SharePoint and would not apply to any email or to files in OneDrive for Business, or Teams chats, or Teams conversations. And you know, one of the things that I want to mention too, you know, in records management, so with the labeling feature, essentially we're just moving forward with a record declaration in place. And there are ways with the label application to then filter in place records designations. So when you're in a library, you can set a column for labels and for retention periods, or based on the retention policy, so that you can see which files in a particular library have been designated or declared a record. For e-discovery and legal hold, again, this is, you know, it's leveraging a lot of the same features of labels, and allows you to have a lot of the same, allows you to manage and to do e-discovery, and then to designate specialists for the review of the files that have been collected and gathered for e-discovery. And then also to mention that advanced e-discovery features are in E5 only. All right, so there has been a lot of information to share. I hope that we've done a somewhat comprehensive job in outlining document management in Office 365, especially today. So lots of changes, great changes in my opinion, in being able to not have to think about where your files are and how you access them. But you can access them leveraging any of the tools in Office 365, which is great. So we've talked about setting it up, choosing which apps are appropriate for you, how to organize them, thinking through a flatter organization structure and hierarchy, and approaching it from that perspective, categorizing, looking at metadata, how to apply metadata, and some of the enhanced metadata application features that are on their way, sharing the enhanced sharing features, and then finally, retention, leveraging labels in Office 365 to apply your records management schedule to Office 365 and everything under the umbrella. So with that said, we have a little bit of time. I'm going to just also plug that we have a strategy engagement for Office 365, and it's something that you can sign up for and you can do, and you'll get someone like me or one of my other colleagues who will work with you on this exact content, and we can dive even deeper into some of the topics to figure out, what do you want to enable? What do you want to manage? How do you want to apply labels? What's going to be the best course of action to perhaps unnest some of your subsites and to look at your hierarchy in a more flat way? So definitely connect with us if you're interested in setting up an Office 365 strategy engagement. And one last ask that I have of all of you is, in trying to put this presentation together and thinking through all the topics, there's so much we didn't cover. We didn't even talk about workflow. We didn't talk about automated publishing. We didn't talk about flow. And there's so much happening with flow right now that will be improving the way information is managed and connected between different site collections and different libraries. So there's more for us to talk about. There's more for us to share. We could dive deeper into all of these topics. Please reach out to us. Drop us a note in the questions or in the chat if you think, if you would be interested in a series on document management in Office 365. And what we would do then is, if we get enough interest, we would set up perhaps maybe 2 or 3 more webinars where we dive deeper into a lot of these subjects. Let us know what you're interested in learning more about. We'd be happy to do it. So with that, Sasha, I think we have time for maybe one or 2 questions.
Let's see. I think for the most part, there's just been comments kind of agreeing with where you were going. And let's see, the one question is, if I want a great discussion forum with internal and external users, is Teams the best solution?
It probably is still for now, because you have Teams external access, so you can invite other external folks into your team, and they can collaborate with you in conversations and in files. I know that if the user is already a member of Office 365 and they have their own teams, the toggling between teams is not ideal. So I am hoping that a solution comes for that very soon.
Okay, let's see. And I think we're getting good feedback on interest for more webinars, so I'll definitely take note of that. And then one more question is, how do you feel about modern SharePoint site collections which are not connected to 365 groups?
I don't know that I have any issue with it. I mean, the real benefit is in the permissioning. So if If you are more comfortable managing permissions, site collection permissions, leveraging the SharePoint security and permission schema, then I don't see any issue with it. But there are a lot of enhanced administrative benefits to groupifying a site collection, essentially. So.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we are going to end right on time. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, I know it's a lot of information and we aren't able to go really very deep into any of the topics, but would be happy to have any offline conversations and to dive deeper with any of you on the line. So thanks so much for your time. Have a great rest of your afternoon and week, and have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Jill. Bye.